about um, Bhagavan's teachings in relation to living in the world. Bhagavan's whole life was as simple as it could be. He did with the fewest possible possessions that he could. But now, 70 years later, after his death, the world has completely changed.
Yeah.
And we're living in this kind of digital fantasy world. And my question is, how deeply is it advisable for us to get involved in all this technical stuff?
This is not something we actually have to be concerned about, because all these things happen according to prarabdha, according to our destiny. Bhagavan used to say, for example, if it is your destiny to be married and have a family, you cannot avoid it. If it's your destiny to be a sannyasi, you cannot avoid it. All these outward things, they're all determined by prarabdha. So it is neither an obstacle to be a householder, nor necessarily a benefit to be a sannyasi. But our prarabdha is allotted in such a way that will be most beneficial for our spiritual progress. So we have been given allotted, the prarabdha of our present dream is a dream where we have all this wonderful technology, where we can see people on the other side of the world and everything. But it's just a part of the dream we now live in. So we have to, that Bhagavan often used to say, and I think that it has a deeper meaning than what it seems on the surface. Bhagavan often used to say, dream hunger is satisfied by dream food. I think we can extend the meaning of that is everything in dream,
Right.
one level of reality or unreality. It's one level of seeming reality. So the seeming reality we are in is we have these means of communication, and all this technology is spiritually and morally neutral. You can use the same technology for watching pornography or watching videos about Bhagavan's teachings. You can communicate. I mean, these are all means of communication. People communicate all sorts of things over the internet. People communicate their love for each other. Their love for God. People communicate how to start wars or terrorism or things. So the tools themselves are neutral. It's what use we make of them. Arguably, a simple life is conducive to a spiritual life. We want to lessen our wants, but because we live in a world where, particularly, for example, now with this coronavirus, we're all supposed to be socially distancing, but this technology allows us means to communicate, and particularly as I see it, for Bhagavan's teachings, because Bhagavan's teachings are a very it will always be a small minority of people in the world who are really interested in Bhagavan's teachings. So we're a very spread out community. We're scattered all over the world. So this modern technology is if we use it properly, it's a beneficial way.
I take your point about in a sense, having no choice, because what we do is a result of our karma, and what will be, will be. But it seems, as in the way that we live our lives, that we actually have some choice, that we can decide, for example, whether to get WhatsApp, in my case, and whether to get Skype and things like that, which I haven't got. I've always tried to keep my involvement in this technological wizardry to an absolute minimum. But I can see now, I mean, for some of the reasons that you adduced, that it is actually very useful, particularly in a situation like this. And it's giving us the kind of communal contact which we wouldn't have otherwise had. And it's good to be with each other. Don't need to say any of that. Question is it a good idea to choose to get more and more complicated?
Well, before answering that question, I will first ask, you say about choice. We always have choice. That is, we are always free to choose whether to do this or do that. But if what we are not free to do is to change our prarabdha in any way. Whatever we are destined to experience, whatever is destined to happen to us, is already decided. As Bhagavan said, what is never to happen will not happen, however much effort is made. What is to happen will not stop, however much obstruction is made. This is certain. So we have the freedom to try to change things. We don't actually have the freedom to change it. So, for example, if you're faced with a choice whether to use Zoom or not, for example, it doesn't matter what you choose. You can decide, oh, I like all this technology, I want to use it. If it's not your destiny to use it, there'll be constant obstacles preventing you. So we cannot go wrong. In the sense because we cannot change our prarabdha, we cannot go wrong in one sense. Where we do go wrong is by wanting things, wanting this or that. Are you still hearing me?
Yes. I'm concentrating very carefully.
Okay, we cannot. Our choices only is affecting our internal life, not our external life. So, in the spiritual path, our aim is to turn our mind within and thereby surrender ourselves. That is not something, for most of us, it's not something we can do all at once, because we still have strong desires and attachments. So we have to slowly wean our mind away from its desires and attachments for things other than ourselves. As Bhagavan said, it's like if the cow has run away from the cow shed, Bhagavan said other paths like yoga are like running after the cow with a stick. And wherever you go, the cow will run some other way. Whereas vichara and surrender are like taking some nice green grass and tempting the cow back into the shed. So this is a gentle path Bhagavan has taught us. So what that means is now we have to try to wean our mind off its desires and attachments. Using any technology is not in itself a bondage. What is a bondage is our desire for that, our attachment to that, our likes and dislikes. So that is why Bhagavan said, many people believe, but if you become a sannyasi or a monk or something, that is more favorable to a spiritual life than, for example, being a family person with a profession and with having to earn a living and maintain your family and everything. That is, superficially it may seem to be so, but actually it is not so, because what binds us is not whatever happens in our outward life, which is determined by prarabdha anyway. What binds us is our desires and attachments. If we can live a life free of attachment, even though we are a household, even though we're a family person, but once the householder or family person who doesn't think I am a householder is a better sannyasi than a sannyasi who thinks I am a sannyasi. It's our identification with the roles we play, our attachment to the roles we play, which of a problem.
Yes.
So we happen to, in our present dream, or this life, our present life as we call it, but according to Bhagavan, it's just a dream. In this present dream, we have dreamt up all this technology where we can talk to people
we seem to be on the other side of the world. Of course, it's all green, but when this technology is here, and when it enables us to talk about Bhagavan's teachings, and why not? Rather than our mind dwelling on other things, rather than watching the news and getting worried about what's happening in the world, why don't we spend our time thinking and talking about Bhagavan's teachings? Of course, merely talking about Bhagavan's teachings is not sufficient. We have to put it into practice. But by talking about Bhagavan's teachings, we are keeping our mind away from other things, and we're encouraging ourselves to try to put into practice what Bhagavan has taught us, to try to surrender that little bit more, try to turn our attention within that little bit more. This is showing the green grass to the runaway cow. The runaway cow is our mind. We are slowly trying to cajole it, tempt it back into the heart, which is the cowshed.
Well, I think what you're saying is that in making a choice, one's using the stick method rather than the grass tempting method.
It's certain, we cannot tell. A choice is an action. The actions of choice is an action of our mind. The actions of mind, speech, and body are driven by there are two forces driving the actions of mind, speech, and body. There is our destiny. That is, if we have to make a certain decision in order to experience a certain destiny. For example, supposing it had been my, take your case, Alistair. You didn't want to become a solicitor, but it was your destiny to become a solicitor. So your mind was driven to make the choices, but made you become a solicitor.
Yeah.
So those choices, it wasn't what you wanted to do, but your destiny made you do. So certain actions are driven by destiny. Certain other actions are driven by our will. Many actions are driven by both. Most people who end up as solicitors, that's what they want to do. So they spend so many years studying law because they want to be a solicitor. I could want to be a solicitor, but it wasn't my destiny. So even if I wanted to be a solicitor, I could never have become a solicitor. Something would have obstructing me. So we have to understand our choices, like all our other actions of mind, speech, and body, all are driven by one or both of two forces. That is destiny and our will. Destiny makes us do those actions that are necessary. Actions mean not just physical actions, but actions of mind, speech, and body, but are necessary in order for us to experience our destiny. Any actions that are not necessary for us to experience our destiny are driven purely by our will. We cannot make out which are which. And in many cases, they're working together in sync. But our destiny gives us what we wanted. Not always, but in some cases it does. And this is down to the smallest detail. As Bhagavan said, the smallest detail is determined by destiny. That's the smallest detail of what we are to experience. People misunderstand this and they think, oh, if everything is predestined, then how can I what freedom do I have to make fresh karma, for example? We have freedom because we are free not only we are compelled to do those actions. That we means here our body, speech, and mind. We are not the actors, it's body, speech, and mind. We feel I am doing it because we take body, speech, and mind as I. But our body, speech, and mind are made to do those actions which are necessary for destiny. At the same time, we have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. So our will is constantly interfering. We are constantly trying to, what we desire may be according to Prarabdha, it may not be according to Prarabdha. If it's according to Prarabdha, it will seem that, oh, because I wanted to be a solicitor and I studied hard and I became a solicitor, we think it's because of our actions. It was actually destiny. But that doesn't mean our will wasn't involved, because we wanted to be a solicitor, so our will happened to be going in the same line as the destiny. So it seems that what was destined to happen happened because we wanted it. Nothing happens according to our present will. It's all according to destiny. But our present will is constantly playing its role. So in the spiritual path, the problem is our will. The problem and the solution, both are our will. It's our outward, our desire to go outwards. That is all our desires and attachment. They are the problem. Our love to turn within, that is bhakti, that is the solution. Our love to turn within and surrender ourselves, that is the solution. So it's a battle within our own will. But whose will is it? That is the most important thing. The will is ego's will. And so long as there is ego, we cannot be totally free of likes and dislikes. We cannot be totally free of desires and attachments. So we need to greatly reduce the strength of our desires and attachment in order to be able to turn our mind within. But ultimately, we cannot be completely free of desires and attachments without cutting the root, which is ego. So that is why purification of mind, most spiritual practices are aimed only at purification of mind, because only when our mind is purified, at least to a certain extent, will we get any liking to turn within. Will we be even willing to accept? But the truth doesn't lie outside. The truth lies within. Goodness lies within. God lies within. There's nothing to be found outside. It's all to be found within. We need a certain purity of mind, not only to understand that, but to be willing to accept it. So that's why other spiritual practices are prescribed. But once we've come to Bhagavan, Bhagavan teaches us, Bhagavan says there are only two paths, self-investigation and self-surrender. He's not saying the other paths are useless. He acknowledges they're necessary for purification of mind. But for getting rid of ego, only two paths, Bhagavan says, self-investigation and self-surrender. But when Bhagavan says two paths, he's actually tricking us. They seem to be two paths from a certain perspective. He made it clear, actually, they're only one path. Sadhuam used to say, it's like a grandfather playing with his grandchildren saying, do you want a coin with a head on it or with a flower on it? And if a child says, I want one with a flower, I don't want a head, I want a flower. He turns he turns the coin over and gives the flower side. And if they say, no, I don't want the flower, I want the head, the same coin gets given the other way. Self-investigation and self-surrender are ultimately one and the same thing. We cannot surrender ourselves completely without without turning our attention within, because the nature of ego is to rise and to come into existence, to stand and to flourish by grasping form. That means by holding things other than itself. So we have to let go of everything and turn within. That is, surrender cannot be complete. Ego cannot be eradicated except by turning our attention within. That is why in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph of Who Am I, which is one of the most important paragraphs of Who Am I, because it's the path where the paragraph where Bhagavan emphasizes the path of surrender. But how does he begin that? He begins by defining what is surrender. Anma chintane tabira, vera chintane kalambavatu, satram idam kadamo. That means not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means thought of oneself, but in effect it means self-attentiveness or self-contemplation. In other words, self-investigation. Without giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than self-attentiveness. And thereby be anmanishta paranai irate, being as one firmly fixed in oneself, that alone is tanne isanaku aripadam. That alone is giving oneself to God. So Bhagavan defines surrender there as being so keenly self-attentive, but we don't give room to the slightest room for any other thought. In other words, we don't attend to anything other than ourselves. That is self-surrender. So, and then he goes on to say, because why we think of other things, because we think it's necessary to think of other things. We think so much depends on us. But he says in the next sentence, However much burden you place on God, he bears all of it. So that means even the burden of thinking of other things, we can leave that burden to God. Let God take care of this life. And then he says, when we know that the one Parameshwara Shakti, the one supreme ruling power, the one power of God is driving all karyas, that everything that is to happen is being made to happen by that. When we know that, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking, it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that. It's necessary to use Zoom, it's necessary not to use Zoom, or whatever. I mean, all these, but one says, you need not even think about these things. Leave that burden to God. If God wants you to use Zoom, you're going to use Zoom anyway. You cannot avoid it. If he doesn't want you to use Zoom, however much desire you may have to use Zoom, you cannot do it. So leave the whole burden to him. And then he gives, in the final sentence, he gives to illustrate what he said in the previous sentence, he gives a beautiful analogy, such a simple analogy, but so rich and deep in meaning. In that analogy, he said, when we're traveling on a train, knowing that the train is all the burdens, why should we, who are traveling in it, suffer by carrying our little luggage on our head instead of putting the luggage aside and traveling sukhamai, he says, happily traveling. So this path of surrender that Bhagavan has taught us, this is the happiest path. Because the more we give up our desires and attachments and our concern for anything other than surrendering ourselves to God, the happier we will be, the more carefree we can be. So what is Bhagavan's path all about? Bhagavan starts, who am I? Bhagavan didn't say this to Shiv Pillai. When he wrote it as an essay, he added a new paragraph at the beginning, and the subject of the first paragraph of Who Am I is about happiness. All living beings, Sakala Jivagalum Dukumembadindri Epodum Sukamai Irika Virumbadalam. Since all living beings, all sentient beings, want or like to be always happy without what is called misery, Yavakum Tanidatilaye Parama Priyam Irapadalam, since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself, Priyataku Sukame Karama Adalalum, and since happiness alone is the cause of love, Manamatra Nidrail, Dinam Anubhavikum, Tansubhavamana Achukate Adeya, to obtain that happiness, which is one's own nature, one's own swabhava, which one experiences daily in sleep, in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of mind, Tanne Tan Aridal Vendum, oneself, knowing oneself is necessary. And
Okay, I think I've got that. I think I've got that.
So can I finish? Can I just finish this one sentence, because this is what Adaku Nana Enam Jnana Vichara me Mukhya Sadhanam. For that, Jnana Vichara, called Who Am I, alone is the principal means. So Bhagavan's teachings are all about happiness. If we are not happy, we are not following Bhagavan's teaching properly. The more we surrender ourselves, the more happy and carefree our life will be. So we don't have to wait for enlightenment. If you want to start practicing for enlightenment now, be happy. And if you want to be happy, stop having any desires. Stop worrying about it's necessary to do this, it's necessary to do that. You had no intention to use Zoom, but Bhagavan sent a little coronavirus along and put you in a situation where you have to use Zoom. So these things, they all happen automatically. So we need not be concerned about these things. We need to cease being interested in our external life. We need to be only interested in one thing: who am I? What am I?
Okay.
Only by finding out what we are can we truly surrender ourselves to God.
because God is what we actually are.
Yeah.
The self we have to surrender is this ego, which can
Yes.
be surrendered only by knowing ourselves. So self-investigation and self-surrender, they're just two sides of one piece of paper. You cannot have one without the other. We can partially surrender without self-investigation, but we cannot go deep in the path of surrender without self-investigation.